My daughter left a voicemail on a Tuesday, not a call I could answer, because she waited until she knew I'd be at my weekly VA appointment. The message lasted 43 seconds. I know because I played it 11 times. Dad, Corey and I have talked about this a lot, and honestly, the house works better when you're not in it. You make things weird. You make Corey uncomfortable. We think it's time you found your own place. Then a pause. Then, you're not getting any younger. Maybe somewhere with other people your age. I stood in the VA parking lot in the November cold, phone in my hand, listening to my own daughter tell me to leave the house I'd owned for 22 years. I didn't cry. I smiled. And the moment I smiled, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Before I go any further, subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me what time it is where you're watching from. I read every single one. My name is Lawrence Broderick. I'm 64 years old, retired from the United States Army after 26 years, and for the past 4 of those years, I have been living in what I thought was my own home in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I say thought because somewhere along the way I let myself forget whose name was on the deed. I have one daughter, Sabrina. She's 36, smart as a whip, always was. Her mother, my ex-wife Patricia, passed away from ovarian cancer 8 years ago, and after that Sabrina and I grew close in the way that grief sometimes pulls people together. She'd call every Sunday, she'd visit on holidays. When she met Corey at a conference in Charlotte, she called me first. I remember thinking he sounded solid on the phone. Steady voice, good manners, she seemed happy. They got married in the backyard of the house on Whitfield Lane. My backyard, my rose bushes in the background of every photo. I paid for the catering, hired the band, wrote a check for the wedding photographer that made my accountant wince. I didn't mind. I was her father. That's what fathers do. The trouble started so gradually I didn't recognize it as trouble. It felt like adjustment. That's the thing nobody tells you about this kind of situation. It never announces itself. It tiptoes in wearing the face of reasonableness. Sabrina and Corey had been renting an apartment in Raleigh when Corey's marketing firm downsized and he lost his position. They needed somewhere to stay just for a few months, Dad, just until Corey lands something. I had a 4-bedroom house and was rattling around in it alone. It seemed obvious. That was 4 years ago. Corey found work about 8 months in, a mid-level account manager job at a logistics company in Durham, pulling in somewhere around $60,000 a year. Sabrina worked in medical billing, maybe $55,000. Between them, they were making decent money. Not rich, but stable. More than enough to rent an apartment. More than enough to save for a house of their own. But they didn't. Every month there was a reason. The market was too expensive. They were saving for a down payment. It made more sense to stay a little longer. I didn't push. Patricia always said I was too easy on Sabrina, that I'd been compensating for the years I was deployed and missed. Maybe she was right, but I told myself I was being supportive, generous, a good father. What I was actually being was useful. Corey never warmed to me. Not in 4 years. I'd come home from grocery shopping and he'd be in the living room playing video games, my television, my couch, and he'd barely nod. I'd cook dinner and he'd take his plate back to the bedroom. He had opinions about everything in my house. The thermostat was always wrong. The internet plan was too slow. My truck in the driveway was blocking the light in the kitchen in the morning. Sabrina started echoing him. Small things at first. Dad, do you really need to watch the news so loud? Dad, Corey has early meetings. Can you not run the dishwasher at night? Dad, maybe you could use the side entrance so you're not walking through the living room when we're relaxing? The side entrance of my own home. About 18 months ago, I started spending more time at the Elks Lodge. Not because I was lonely. I have friends, former colleagues, men I served with who settled in the area. But because my own house had started to feel like a waiting room. A place where I was tolerated, not welcomed. That's where I met Carolyn. She was the new treasurer of the lodge's charity committee. A retired school principal with an opinion about everything, and the patience of a woman who'd spent 30 years managing other people's children. She thought that was funny when I told her. I'm basically pre-qualified for whatever nonsense you're dealing with, she said. We started having dinner on Thursday nights, then Saturday mornings at a diner on Fort Bragg Road that made biscuits the way biscuits are supposed to be made. I felt like myself again, like a person who had things to say that were worth hearing. When I mentioned Carolyn to Sabrina, I thought she'd be glad. Her father, happy, someone in his life. Instead, she went quiet in a way that made the air in the room feel heavier. "How serious is this?" she asked. "We're friends. Good friends. Does she know about your financial situation?" I blinked. "What financial situation?" Sabrina looked at Corey, who was leaning in the kitchen doorway with his arms crossed. He had that expression he got sometimes, like he was watching a transaction he wasn't sure would go in his favor. "You're not exactly young, Dad," Sabrina said. "People take advantage. Carolyn is 61 years old and runs the charity budget for the Elks Lodge. I'm just saying, it's easy for people to see a widower with a house and get ideas." I let it go. I was getting good at letting things go. 3 weeks later, I made the mistake of mentioning that I'd like to have Carolyn over for Sunday dinner. Nothing elaborate, just the four of us, food on the table, an introduction. Corey's response was immediate and flat. "I'm not comfortable with strangers in the house. She's not a stranger to me. She's a stranger to us," he said. "This is our home." 2 words. Our home. I've thought about those 2 words more times than I can count. Sabrina didn't disagree with him. She stood in the kitchen with her hands around a coffee mug and didn't disagree with her husband about whose home it was. My coffee, my kitchen, my mug. As a matter of fact, I'd had it since Fort Bragg, 2003. I said I'd think about it and went to my workshop in the garage. I restore old military firearms, not for sale, just as a hobby, cleaning and preserving pieces that would otherwise deteriorate. There's something satisfying about it. Taking something worn down and neglected and making it function the way it was designed to. I was in there maybe an hour when my phone buzzed on the workbench. A voicemail from Sabrina. I still don't know why she left a voicemail instead of walking 15 feet to the garage door. I think she knew that saying it to my face would require her to see my face while she said it. "Dad, Corey and I have talked about this a lot, and honestly, the house works better when you're not in it. You make things weird. You make Corey uncomfortable. We think it's time you found your own place. You're not getting any younger. Maybe somewhere with other people your age." I stood in the parking lot of the VA the next morning, listening to it again. 11th time. I knew every pause by heart. Then I smiled. Not from happiness. From the same thing I felt right before a mission brief when the intelligence finally confirmed what you'd already suspected. Clarity. The moment when the situation stops being ambiguous and you know exactly what you're looking at. I drove home, made coffee, and called my attorney. His name is Paul Whitmore. I've worked with him for 15 years, since I retired from the Army and needed help structuring my rental property dealings. I own 3 duplexes in the Fayetteville area. Nothing flashy, solid Section 8 income, well maintained. Paul knows every piece of paper attached to my name. I texted him at 7 in the morning. He responded by 7:15. That's why I've kept him for 15 years. "Lawrence," he said when I called, "what's on your mind?" "My daughter and her husband have been living in my house for 4 years without paying rent. Last night, she left me a voicemail telling me to leave. I'd like to discuss my options." A short pause. "How soon can you be in my office?" I drove to Paul's office that afternoon. It's in a brick building off Hay Street, 2nd floor. Smells like old paper and window unit air conditioning. I'd been there for property closings, for lease agreements, for my own estate planning. I'd never been there for something like this. Paul had already pulled up my property records before I sat down. "Walk me through the arrangement," he said. I did. No lease agreement, no rent payments, no written anything. Just a verbal understanding that was supposed to last a few months and lasted 48 months instead. During which time I had paid the mortgage, the property taxes, the homeowner's insurance, all utilities, and the majority of groceries. I'd also co-signed an auto loan for Sabrina's Honda Pilot when her credit wasn't strong enough to qualify a loan. $34,000, about $22,000 still outstanding. Paul leaned back in his chair and looked at me with the expression of a man who had heard this story before, in various forms, from various clients. "Lawrence, you could have been a textbook case for a law school real estate course," he said. "What outcome are you looking for?" "I want my house back. And I want them to understand what they've been taking for granted." "Then let's talk about how North Carolina handles this." We spent 2 hours going over everything. The property deed, Lawrence Broderick, sole owner. The utility accounts, Lawrence Broderick, sole payer. The tax records, Lawrence Broderick, sole taxpayer. Neither Sabrina nor Corey appeared on a single document that carried legal weight. In North Carolina, a verbal month-to-month tenancy gives a landlord the right to terminate with proper written notice, 10 days for non-payment, 30 days for a standard month-to-month termination. Paul recommended 30 days to be clean and unassailable. We serve the notice via certified mail and personal delivery, he said. You document everything. They have 30 days to vacate or begin paying market rent, which for a 4-bedroom on Whitfield Lane would be approximately $2,400 a month. They can't afford that based on what you've told me. No, not on top of their existing expenses. I'd thought about their finances more than they probably imagined. Corey's $60,000, Sabrina's $55,000. Together around $9,000 a month before taxes. After taxes, closer to $6,500. Car payments. Sabrina's Pilot plus a Ford F-150 Corey had bought last year, financed at a rate that made my eyes water. Student loans Corey was still paying off. Credit cards they kept at high balances. Sabrina's shopping habit that showed up in packages on my porch 3-4 times a week. Adding $2,400 in rent wasn't a stretch. It was a wall. When do we start? I asked. Paul looked at his watch. Notice can be delivered tomorrow. Do it. I drove home that evening down the highway with the radio off. The sun was setting over the pine trees, the way it does in November in North Carolina. Early and orange and honest. I thought about Sabrina at 8 years old, helping me wash the truck on Saturday mornings. I thought about her at 14 reading on the porch while I grilled. I thought about her standing in front of my rose bushes in her wedding dress, happy, really happy. Then I thought about the house works better when you're not in it. Some things can't be unsaid. I parked in the driveway and went straight to my workshop, worked on a 1943 Springfield until midnight. By the time I went to bed, I'd made my peace with what came next. The notice arrived by courier the following afternoon. Certified mail backup went out the same morning. I was at Carolyn's house when Sabrina's first call came in at 2:07 p.m., then 2:09, then 2:11. By 2:30, I had 9 missed calls and a series of texts that escalated from confused to frantic to finally furious. We were sitting at Carolyn's kitchen table playing Scrabble. She watched me decline each call calmly. They got the notice, she said. Evidently. Are you going to answer? Not yet. When they're yelling, no one learns anything. I answered the 10th call at 4 o'clock. Sabrina's voice hit the line before I could say a word. What is this? Dad, what is this piece of paper? It's a 30-day notice to vacate or begin paying market rent. Paul Whitmore's office sent it this morning. You hired a lawyer? Against your own family? I hired a lawyer to protect my own property. From people who forgot it was my property. We can't afford $2,400 a month. Then I suggest you start looking at rentals. There are nice 2-bedrooms in Hope Mills starting around $1,200. Corey's voice cut in from the background, and then suddenly he was on the line. He must have grabbed the phone. This is because of that woman, isn't it? You're trying to clear us out so you can move her in. This is because your wife left me a voicemail telling me to leave my own home, Corey. That's what this is because of. Silence. I don't have anything else to say tonight, I told him. You have 30 days. Use them well. I hung up and looked at Carolyn across the table. She had one hand around her coffee cup and was watching me with the careful expression of someone who understood that certain moments should just be allowed to sit. Well, she said after a moment. Well, I agreed. That weekend, I started sorting through my belongings, not because I was leaving. I wasn't. But because clarity has a way of making you evaluate what matters. I had the guest room organized into boxes by Sunday evening. Things to keep, things to donate, things I'd been holding on to out of habit with no actual reason. I also met with a property manager named Dana Suggs, a woman who'd handled 2 of my duplexes for 6 years and knew the Fayetteville rental market the way she knew her own address. I explained the situation without embellishment. 4-bedroom, Whitfield Lane, updated kitchen, 2-car garage, she said, nodding slowly. Lawrence, if you want to sell that house right now, I can have offers by Friday. I'm not ready to sell. Not yet, but you're thinking about it. I'm thinking about everything. She left me with a market analysis. Current comparable sales, $387,000 to $412,000. My remaining mortgage, $61,000. I did the math on the drive home. If I sold, I'd clear somewhere in the neighborhood of $320,000 after fees, payoff, and taxes. Enough to buy something smaller outright. Something entirely mine, with no history attached to the walls. The calls didn't stop that week. Sabrina tried different approaches. Monday was angry. Tuesday was tearful. Wednesday she called at 7 a.m., voice carefully controlled, using the tone she probably used with difficult clients at work. "Dad, let's be adults. Let's talk about this without the lawyers." "My lawyer's not preventing us from talking, Sabrina. Your voicemail is." Thursday, she showed up at the door of my workshop. I heard her knock on the side door, the one she'd asked me to use, and felt something cold move through me at the irony. I let her in. She looked tired. She sat on the stool near the workbench and was quiet for a moment, looking at the rifle I had laid out in pieces on the mat. "I didn't mean it the way it sounded," she said. "Which part?" "Any of it. I was frustrated." Corey was frustrated. He'd been going through stuff at work, and I took his side too fast without. Sabrina. I kept my eyes on what I was doing, a careful habit I'd developed over the years. You hear better when you're doing something with your hands. "Has Corey ever thanked me for letting you two stay here?" She was quiet. "Have you?" "Not the polite kind, the real kind." More quiet. "Do you know what I've spent on this household in the past 4 years? Mortgage, utilities, groceries, your car loan?" I set down the cleaning rod. I added it up for Paul. It's just over $160,000. Not counting the wedding. Her face shifted. "Dad, I'm not saying that to hurt you. I'm saying it because I think you forgot. I think both of you forgot so completely that it stopped feeling like a gift and started feeling like an entitlement. And the moment I showed signs of having my own life, I picked the rod back up. You left me a voicemail." She was crying by the time she left. Real tears, not performance tears. I know the difference. I've known her since she was 3 days old. But I didn't change my mind. The following week, I called Paul to set the next part in motion. Because there was a next part. I'd been planning it since the night I stood in the VA parking lot. 3 years ago, when Sabrina asked me to co-sign the auto loan for the pilot, I did it without hesitation. A father's instinct. The loan was held through Truist Bank, $34,000 original balance, roughly $22,000 remaining. I was listed as co-signer, which meant my credit and income were part of the approval. Under North Carolina law, a co-signer can petition to be removed from a loan when circumstances materially change. Estrangement qualified. A pending eviction qualifies even more. "Timing matters here," Paul said. "We file the petition after the 30-day notice period ends. That way, if they try to claim the eviction is retaliatory, the co-signer removal is clearly a separate action based on changed circumstances." How long until the bank acts on it? 10 business days to acknowledge receipt, another 10 to complete the credit reevaluation. Without your income backing the loan, Sabrina's debt-to-income ratio fails their threshold. They'll notify her that the loan terms are under review, and she'll need to either find a replacement cosigner or address the balance. She won't find one. Her own mother's family are the logical candidates, and they're in Ohio. Her uncle has had a bankruptcy in the last 5 years. Paul made a note. Then she'll face repossession or refinancing at a significantly higher rate. She'll figure it out. She's smart. She's always been smart. I said it without bitterness. It's still true. The 30-day deadline came like weather. You know it's coming. You've watched the forecast, and it still has a kind of weight when it finally arrives. I spent that morning at my workshop, not working on anything in particular, just sitting in the quiet. I have a small radio in there, a portable thing I've had since 2001. I turned it to a country station and listened to songs I half knew. Corey knocked on the workshop door that afternoon. First time in 4 years he'd come to find me in there. I thought about that while I waited for the second knock, which came after about 10 seconds. "Come in," I said. He stood in the doorway with his hands in his jacket pockets. He was wearing the expression of a man who had rehearsed what he was going to say and already knew it wasn't enough. "We need more time," he said. 30 days isn't realistic for finding a place and getting deposits together. We've got first month, last month, security. That's close to $6,000. We don't have liquid right now. You've had 4 years to build that savings, Corey. That's not fair. What part of it isn't fair? He looked at the floor. A long moment passed. In the background, the radio played something with a steel guitar. We'll pay you back, he said. Everything we owe. Once we get settled, you've owed me for 4 years. There's no mechanism by which I believe that she's your daughter. She is. And I love her. And when she needed help, I opened my home without hesitation. What I won't do is continue pretending that a voicemail telling me to leave is something that just blows over. He left without another word. Paul filed the formal eviction notice with Cumberland County the following morning. A court date was set for 6 weeks out. I got a copy via email, saved it to the folder I'd labeled simply Property 2024, and went about my day. 2 days later, I called Dana Suggs. Tell me more about that market analysis. She was in my kitchen within the hour. We went through the comps carefully. The neighborhood had appreciated more than I'd realized. One house on the same street, smaller lot, older roof, had sold for $398,000 in September. Mine was in better shape. Better kitchen, newer HVAC. The garage workshop was a selling point for the right buyer. If you list in January, you're looking at a strong spring market, she said. Offer above asking isn't unusual right now for move-in ready inventory. I'm not waiting until January. What's it look like if we list in December? She smiled slightly. Motivated seller gets motivated buyers. We shook hands. The listing went up the second week of December. Sabrina called when she saw it on Zillow. She'd been checking the property, apparently. I know because she called within 40 minutes of the listing going live. You're selling the house? Yes. Where are we supposed to go, Dad? There's a court date in 6 weeks. You're evicting us and selling the house? The court date is because you didn't vacate or begin paying rent as required by the notice. The sale is because I've decided to simplify my life. These are 2 separate decisions that happen to share a timeline. This is vindictive. Vindictive would have been changing the locks. I followed every legal process, gave you every required notice, and offered you a fair market rate to stay. You declined. That's not vindictive, Sabrina. That's consequence. She hung up. I put the phone in my pocket and went back to the listing paperwork Dana had left on the kitchen table. The first showing was that Saturday. By Wednesday, I had 2 offers. One was contingent on financing and came in at $391,000. The other was a cash offer from a retired couple relocating from New Jersey at $405,000. They wanted a 60-day close, which put us in mid-February, enough time for the court process to complete. I accepted the cash offer by end of business Wednesday. The court date arrived on a gray January morning, the kind of cold that settles into North Carolina without snow to justify it. I drove downtown with Paul, parked in the county garage, walked into a building that smelled like industrial cleaning solution and fluorescent lights. Sabrina and Corey were already in the hallway when we arrived. Sabrina had dressed carefully, a dark blazer, her hair pulled back. Corey wore a suit that didn't fit him well. Their attorney was a young man from a legal aid firm, earnest-looking, carrying a folder that bulged at the sides. Sabrina met my eyes when I came in. I nodded. She looked away. The hearing was in front of Judge William Ashby, a man in his 60s with reading glasses he kept taking on and off. He reviewed the filings before either attorney had finished introducing themselves. Paul presented our case methodically. Property deed, utility records, the certified mail receipt for the 30-day notice. The voicemail, yes, I'd had it transcribed and submitted as evidence. Their attorney argued hardship, family circumstances, the cruelty of evicting a daughter and son-in-law without adequate transition time. He was good. He hit the emotional notes with skill. Then Judge Ashby asked Sabrina directly, "Did you ever pay rent to your father?" She stood. "No, Your Honor. It was a family arrangement." "Did you have any written agreement establishing a right to remain indefinitely?" "Not in writing." "And did you leave a voicemail message on November 4th informing your father that, and I'm quoting from the transcript here, the house works better when you're not in it, and suggesting he find a place with other people his age?" A long pause. "Yes, Your Honor, I did. I regret the way I said it. Judge Ashby set down the transcript. Ms. Broderick, your father gave you written notice, offered you the option to pay market rent, and followed every procedural requirement under North Carolina law. I understand this is painful. Family matters in court usually are. But the law is clear. He looked at both of them. I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiff. You have 21 days to vacate the property at 2214 Whitfield Lane. Failure to do so will result in a writ of possession enforced by the sheriff's department. The gavel came down. Corey put his hand on Sabrina's arm. She didn't cry in the courtroom. I respected that. She held herself together the way she'd always held herself together under pressure, which was one of the things about her I'd always admired. Paul and I walked out into the cold. Clean, he said, about as clean as it gets. Thank you, Paul. What's next for you? I thought about the question, about Dana's listing, about the cash offer pending, about a conversation I'd had with Carolyn the previous week, about a retirement community in Pinehurst, 20 miles from the Sandhills, where houses sold for considerably less than Fayetteville, and the golf courses were legitimately beautiful. Not that I golf, but the point was the land, the quiet, the distance from everything that had accumulated around me. Something smaller, I said. Something mine, Sabrina. Sabrina and Corey were out of the house within 18 days. They left the keys on the kitchen counter, same as people always do when they don't have a graceful way to say goodbye. The property manager did a walkthrough. A few scuffs on the bedroom walls, a broken towel bar in the hallway bathroom, a stain on the carpet in the master that hadn't been there when they moved in. I filed an insurance claim for the carpet. The rest I absorbed. I spent 2 days in the empty house, moving through rooms I hadn't truly occupied in years. The house echoed differently empty. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, just standing, not doing anything in particular, remembering what it had felt like before it stopped being mine. Then I locked the door and drove away. The closing was mid-February, a Thursday conference room at Paul's office, 2 hours of paperwork and one very large wire transfer. When it was done, I sat in my truck in the parking garage for a few minutes, looking at the deposit confirmation on my phone. $405,000, minus the mortgage payoff of $61,000, minus closing costs. Net proceeds $326,800. I wasn't going to do anything reckless with it. I had the duplexes, the rental income, my Army pension, the VA benefits. I was fine. I had always been fine. That was the part Sabrina and Corey never understood, or maybe never wanted to look at too closely. They didn't need to be there. The need was manufactured from convenience and then mistaken for necessity. 3 weeks after closing, I put an offer on a 2-bedroom bungalow in Pinehurst. Fee 600 square feet, sun porch on the south side, a detached garage with good light and better ventilation than the workshop I'd left behind. The sellers were asking $229,000. We settled at $221,000, cash, 10-day close. Carolyn helped me move in. We carried boxes in from her SUV on a Saturday in March, and when we were done, we sat on the sun porch with sandwiches and sweet tea and listened to the birds making whatever argument birds make in early spring. She'd hung wind chimes by the door. I hadn't asked her to. I didn't take them down. You look different, she said. I feel different. Good different? I thought about the right word for it. Not happy exactly, or not just happy. More like settled. The way a piece of equipment feels when you've cleaned and adjusted it properly, and you know every component is doing what it's supposed to do. Level, I said. I feel level. She laughed at that. She often laughs at things I say that aren't quite jokes. I've decided I like it. Trey? No, that's not right. The names I'm thinking of aren't the point. Let me say it plainly. I heard from Sabrina about 6 weeks after I moved in, a text from a number I didn't recognize. She'd apparently gotten a new phone. Dad, I know you don't want to hear from me right now. Corey and I are in an apartment in Garner. It's small. 2 bedrooms, 3rd floor, no parking included. We're okay. I wanted you to know we're okay. I also wanted to say that I've been thinking about what you said in the workshop. About forgetting. I think you were right. I think I forgot in a way I can't fully explain, but I've been trying to understand it. I'm not asking for anything. I just didn't want you to think I was angry. I'm not angry. I'm embarrassed. And I'm sorry. I read it twice. Then I set the phone down and looked out at the yard. The pine trees at the back of the lot, the way the afternoon light cut through them at an angle that reminded me of nothing specific but felt familiar anyway. I didn't respond right away. Not because I was punishing her, because the right response to something like that takes time, and time is the only currency that means anything in this kind of situation. Words come easy. Months don't. I waited 3 weeks. Then I sent, "I got your message. I'm glad you're okay. I'm okay too. That's enough for now." She didn't respond immediately either, which I respected. The spring came on fast, the way it does in the sandhills. One week you need a jacket, the next week you don't. I set up the new workshop in the garage, got a proper ventilation fan installed, organized the tools the way I'd always wanted them organized without accounting for anyone else's preferences. I had 4 pieces waiting for attention: a 1918 Springfield that a retired schoolteacher had left to a church estate sale, a pocket watch that had belonged to a man who'd served in the Pacific, a rusted mess of a bolt action that a neighbor had found in his attic and didn't want to throw away, and a 1943 that I'd moved with me from Whitfield Lane and never quite finished. I started with the 1943. It felt right to finish what I'd started. Carolyn came by on Sunday afternoons. Sometimes we cooked together. Sometimes we just sat in separate chairs on the porch, reading, not talking, comfortable in the way that takes years to develop with some people and arrives in months with others. I didn't know what to call what we were. She didn't seem to need a label. Neither did I. One evening in April, I got a call from a number I recognized, Sabrina's new one, saved now in my contacts. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered, "Dad." Her voice was different, more careful, more real, less performance in it. I just wanted to call and say happy birthday. My birthday was still 3 weeks away. I noted that but didn't say it. "Thank you," I said. "How's the new place?" "Good. Quiet. Has a sun porch. You always wanted a sun porch." I did. A silence that wasn't uncomfortable. Outside my window, the wind chimes Carolyn had hung were moving in a light evening breeze. "I've been seeing a therapist," Sabrina said. "Since January. I know that's probably, I don't know why I'm telling you. I just wanted you to know I've been working on some things." "That's good to hear." She says I have a pattern of choosing the path of least conflict and then resenting the people around me for it, which apparently means I let Corey's frustration become mine without ever examining whether I actually agreed with it. A pause. She also said, "I owe you a real apology. Not a text, a real one." "Maybe someday," she agreed. "I'm not pushing. I know." We talked for 11 minutes. Not about anything that required resolution. Just a conversation, the kind where you're checking to see if the connection still exists. It did. Damaged, worn down in places, but there. After I hung up, I sat in the workshop for a while with the lights on, not doing anything, just being present in the room. The 1943 Springfield sat on the mat, finished, clean, all its original parts in their correct positions, functioning as it was built to function. Some things take time. Some things take distance. Some things you can't restore until you stop letting people handle them carelessly. I turned off the light and went inside. Carolyn had left a casserole in the refrigerator with a note stuck to it. The note said, "Don't eat it cold, Lawrence, I mean it." I heated it up, ate at the kitchen table, listened to the wind chimes. I had chosen myself, not out of selfishness, not out of bitterness, out of the same clear-eyed understanding that had kept me functional through 26 years of service. You cannot hold a position indefinitely if you're the only one defending it. I'd held mine long enough. Now I was living in it instead.